The night I was made to scrub my own girlfriend's kitchen floor like a servant, I smiled and said nothing, because I already knew one thing. They thought I was weak. They thought I was trapped. But they had no idea I was collecting everything. Every message, every recording, every lie. And when the time came, I would not beg. I would not fight in private. I would expose the entire family in front of the people they cared about most. My name is Daniel Miller, and this is the night my life changed forever. Her name was Olivia Carter. When I first met Olivia, I thought she was the kind of woman people only meet once in a lifetime. She was calm, kind, and smart. She had this soft way of talking that made you feel safe. Not flashy, not fake, just real. She worked in a small medical office in downtown Chicago, and I met her by accident one rainy evening when both of us were stuck under the same coffee shop awning. I remember she laughed when I said something stupid about the weather, and that laugh stayed in my head for days. We started talking after that, then texting, then long calls at night, then dinners, then weekends, and slowly, without me even realizing it, Olivia became the best part of my life. I had been through a rough time before her. A few years earlier, I made a terrible mistake. Not a violent one, not something crazy. Just a stupid, desperate mistake from a younger version of me who was trying to fix problems without thinking clearly. My mother was sick back then. Bills were stacking up. I was tired, broke, and scared. And in that weak moment, I signed papers for a loan that I should have never touched. I thought I was helping a friend. I thought I was buying time. Instead, I got dragged into a mess that stayed on my record and made me carry shame for years. I fixed it later. I paid what I could. I worked hard. I got a clean job. I kept my head down. But the shame never fully left me. Olivia knew part of it. Not the full story at first, but enough. And she never looked at me like I was dirty. She looked at me like I was human. That was the reason I loved her. That was the reason I trusted her. So when she said she wanted me to meet her family, I was nervous, but hopeful. I thought it would be a normal dinner. A little awkward, maybe. A few serious questions. Then some polite smiles. Then, if I was lucky, acceptance. I was wrong. The first time I walked into the Carter house, I felt it immediately. That kind of house has a smell, not just perfume or food. Control. The place was big, polished, and cold, in a way rich houses often are when nobody is truly happy inside them. Her father, Richard Carter, shook my hand too hard. Her mother, Melissa Carter, looked me up and down like I was something she didn't want on her carpet. Her younger brother, Kyle, didn't even try to hide his smirk. But Olivia smiled at me, and that was enough for me to believe I could survive it. At first, I thought they were just overprotective. Rich families can be like that. They ask too many questions. They test you. They want to know if you're good enough for their daughter. I understood that. I respected that. So, I stayed polite. I answered everything honestly. Where I worked, what I did, what I wanted for the future. I told them I loved Olivia and wanted to build a life with her. Richard nodded like a man hearing a speech he didn't care about. Melissa smiled without warmth. Kyle looked bored, but Olivia's hand found mine under the table, and I held on to that. Then, 2 weeks later, Richard asked me to stay over for a few days. He said the house was busy. He said Olivia would feel more comfortable if I was around. He said it would help us get used to being family. I didn't want to overthink it. I thought it was a chance to get closer to them. I thought maybe they were finally opening up. So I agreed. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was trusting them after I saw their true faces. The first morning I stayed there, Melissa knocked on my door before sunrise. She didn't ask. She told, "Daniel, since you're here, we need help with the house. Can you start with breakfast?" I blinked at her, half awake. "Of course," I said. I cooked eggs, toast and coffee. Then she told me to wash the dishes. I did that too. Then she said the living room needed vacuuming, so I did it. Then Richard told me to take out the trash and clean the garage. I still didn't think much of it. I told myself they were just assigning random tasks because I was staying there. But by the third day, I understood. This was not help. This was humiliation. They were using me like hired labor, and they enjoyed it. Melissa started making comments. Daniel, the floor still has streaks. Daniel, don't leave that there. Daniel, you missed a spot. Richard treated me like I was a boy from the street who should be grateful for crumbs. Kyle called me the houseboy when he thought I couldn't hear. And Olivia. Olivia was confused. At first, she didn't see the full picture. Her mother would pull her into another room whenever chores came up. Her father would speak to me privately, always with a smile that never reached his eyes. One evening, Richard asked me to clean the upstairs hallway after dinner. When I finished, he came back and handed me a laundry basket. Fold these too, he said. I looked at him. Richard, I'm happy to help, but I didn't realize I was expected to do all the housework. He smiled, not kindly. Daniel, if you're going to be part of this family, you need to understand how things work around here. Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice. You already have a past people might not like. Don't make things worse. That was the first time I knew. He knew about my mistake, not just the public part. He knew details, dates, names, records. My stomach went cold. How do you know about that? I asked. He looked at me like he had just won something. Families talk, he said. Then he left me standing there with the laundry basket in my hands. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I knew exactly what was happening. They weren't helping me join the family. They were holding my past over my head. And from that day on, they treated me like a servant who had to earn the right to stay silent. It got worse. Much worse. Melissa began leaving lists for me on the kitchen counter. Clean the kitchen. Wash the windows. Mop the garage. Carry groceries. Serve guests. Fix the guest room. Take out trash. Polish the silverware. Kyle would deliberately spill things just to watch me clean them. Richard made me mow the lawn in the middle of a heat wave, and then complained that I was moving too slowly. At family gatherings, they introduced me as someone helping out, not Olivia's boyfriend, not a guest, not even a future son-in-law. Just help, a body, a pair of hands, a man they could order around because they believed I would never fight back. And the worst part? Olivia still didn't know how bad it was. Or maybe she saw pieces of it and didn't want to believe her own family could be that cruel. I tried to tell her once. We were in the backyard late one evening, alone for a few minutes. I told her, "Your father knows about my past. He's using it against me." She looked shocked. "Daniel, no, that can't be true. I'm telling you it is." She shook her head, upset now. "He probably just meant..." "Olivia," I said gently, "he's making me clean this house like staff." Her eyes filled with confusion and pain. "I'll talk to him." But before she could, Melissa called her inside, and the conversation died right there. That night, I sat in the guest room and stared at the ceiling. I loved Olivia. That was the hardest part, because if I didn't love her, I could have walked away the second I saw the first sign of disrespect. But love makes you hope. Love makes you explain away things that should be impossible. Love makes you think, maybe this is temporary. Maybe they are just under stress. Maybe once they see I'm serious about her, they'll change. So I stayed, and I smiled, and I kept working. But inside, I started planning. Not revenge. Not yet. Protection. I needed proof, because in a house like that, words meant nothing. If I accused them, they would deny everything. They would say I was lying. They would say I was unstable. They would say I was trying to hurt their family because I had been caught doing what I was supposed to do. So I started collecting evidence. I bought a small voice recorder and kept it in my jacket pocket. I saved every text message, every command, every insult, every threat. I learned when Richard called me into his office, he liked to talk while standing near the window. That meant the recorder could catch everything if I set it on the desk. I learned Melissa never deleted her messages to me because she assumed I would be too ashamed to keep them. I learned Kyle bragged too much around his friends. I learned the family had secrets hidden in places where they thought nobody would look. And one afternoon, while cleaning Richard's office, I found the first real crack. A folder, tucked under a stack of old paperwork. Inside were bank statements, property records, and documents related to Olivia's late grandmother's estate. Something felt wrong immediately. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a detective. But I knew enough to know the numbers didn't match. Money had moved. A lot of money, and not where it should have gone. There were signatures that looked rushed, transfers that made no sense, a note with Richard's handwriting on it that read, "Keep this away from Olivia." My heart started pounding. I took pictures of everything. My shirt was plain. I looked nothing like a man about to destroy a rich family. And maybe that was exactly why it would work. I dressed carefully, not fancy, just clean, strong, calm. I placed the recorder in my pocket. I made sure my phone was fully charged. I sent one last message to a lawyer I had contacted 2 days earlier. Then I walked downstairs. The dining room was full. Richard sat at the head of the table like a king. Melissa moved around, pouring wine. Kyle laughed with 2 cousins. Olivia sat near the center, looking nervous but beautiful. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Michael were there too. The table was set with expensive dishes and polished silverware. For a moment, I almost felt the old fear rise in me. But then, I remembered every insult, every command, every time I had been made to feel smaller than dust. So I sat down, folded my hands, and waited. Richard looked at me with false warmth. "Daniel," he said, "come here a moment." I stood. He smiled at the relatives. "This young man has been helping us a great deal lately." The relatives nodded politely. Melissa added, "He's been wonderful with household tasks." A few people chuckled. Kyle smirked. And then Richard said the line that told me exactly how little he understood me. "He knows his place." There was silence for a second. Olivia frowned. "Dad." But Richard lifted a hand. "I think everyone should understand the situation clearly." He looked directly at me. "Some people carry baggage. Some people need structure. We've been giving Daniel a chance to prove himself." I felt the room grow quiet. That was when I stood up slowly and said, "You're right, Richard." He looked satisfied. I turned to the relatives. "I have been proving something." Melissa's smile began to fade. Olivia looked at me, confused. I reached into my pocket and took out my phone. Richard's expression changed immediately. "Daniel, what are you doing?" I ignored him. "I'm showing everyone what this family has been hiding." I pressed play. At first, there was only the sound of my recorder. Then Richard's voice filled the room. Clear, cold. "I know about your past. Don't make things worse." Then Melissa's voice from another clip. "Make sure he takes out the trash before the guests arrive." Then Kyle, laughing. "He's basically the maid now." The room went dead silent. Olivia's face went pale. Aunt Sarah covered her mouth. Uncle Michael sat forward. Richard stood up so fast his chair almost fell backward. "Turn that off." I didn't. I played another clip. Richard again. "If you want to keep Olivia's respect, you'll do exactly what we say." And then another. "Melissa. You're useful when you're quiet." Kyle, houseboy. "Did you miss a spot?" Gasps moved around the table. Olivia turned to her mother. "Mom, what is this?" Melissa looked trapped for the first time in her life. "It's taken out of context," she said quickly. Then I pulled out the printed documents. Bank records, estate transfers, the forged signature, photos of the hidden file. I placed them on the table one by one. "This," I said, my voice steady now, "is not taken out of context." Richard moved toward me. "You have no right." "I have every right," I said. I looked around the table. "He blackmailed me because of a mistake from years ago. He forced me to do housework like a servant. He and Melissa used fear to keep me silent, while they covered up missing money from Olivia's grandmother's estate." The relatives were staring now. Olivia was frozen. Her eyes kept moving from the papers to her father's face. Richard snapped, "That money was handled legally." I smiled without humor. "Then explain the forged signature." No one spoke. I turned to Olivia. "Your name was used without your permission." She looked like she had been hit. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be true." "It is," I said softly. I had expected anger. I had expected denial. What I did not expect was the look on Olivia's face. That kind of pain is hard to describe. It was like watching someone realize the ground beneath their own feet was not real. She looked at her father, then her mother, then back at me. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, voice shaking. "I tried," I said, "more than once." Richard slammed his palm on the table. "You are humiliating this family." I turned to him. "No, Richard. You did that yourself." Then I reached into my jacket and took out one final item, a small folder. Inside was a copy of the message I had sent to the lawyer, plus a notice showing that the evidence had already been shared with the proper authorities. Richard's face changed. Melissa looked terrified. Kyle actually stepped backward, and that was when I said the line I had been holding in my chest for weeks. "I am not your maid. I am not your toy. I am not your secret to control." My voice was low, but every word landed hard. "You picked the wrong man to break." The room was silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Olivia stood up slowly. Her chair scraped across the floor. Richard tried to speak. "Olivia, listen to me," but she cut him off. "No, you listen to me." Her voice was stronger than I had ever heard it. "Did you take money from Grandma's estate?" Melissa tried to step in. "Honey, did you lie to me?" Olivia snapped. Her mother's mouth opened and closed without sound, and that was answer enough. Olivia's face crumpled for a second, but she held herself together. Then she looked at me. I could see the question in her eyes. "Why didn't you leave? Why did you stay? Why did you let them hurt you?" I gave her the simplest answer I could. "Because I loved you, and because I wanted the truth to be undeniable." That was when the relatives started talking at once. Aunt Sarah was furious. Uncle Michael demanded to see the papers. One cousin asked how long this had been going on. Another asked if the police should be called. Richard began shouting over everyone, trying to regain control, but the room was already gone. He had lost it. The image, the power, the respect. Everything he had built on lies was falling apart in front of his own family. Melissa started crying, but it didn't help her. Kyle sat down and put his head in his hands, and Olivia just kept standing there, staring at the people who raised her. Finally, she whispered, "Get out." Richard blinked. "Olivia, get out of my house." The words were quiet, but they were stronger than his shouting. He tried one last time. "You're making a mistake." She looked at him with tears falling now. "No, you made the mistake." That was the moment I knew the story was over. Not the pain, not the damage, but the part where they controlled the truth. I picked up my jacket. No one stopped me. I walked toward the door. Then I paused and looked back just once. Not at Richard, not at Melissa, not at Kyle, at Olivia. She was crying now, but she wasn't weak. She was waking up. I said, "You deserve better than this." Her hand covered her mouth. I opened the door, and behind me, the sound of chaos began. Voices rising, questions flying, a family trying to save a name that was already breaking apart. I stepped outside into the cold night air, and finally, took a full breath for the first time in weeks. My hands were shaking. My chest hurt. But I felt lighter than I had in years. Because the truth was no longer trapped inside me. It was out. And once the truth is out, lies do not survive long. In the days that followed, everything moved fast. Lawyers called. Bank records were reviewed. The forged documents were checked. The accounts were frozen. More than one relative came forward after the dinner and admitted they had suspected Richard's behavior for years but never had proof. Melissa tried to call me twice. Kyle sent one message that said I ruined the family. I never replied. Olivia called me the next morning. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Her voice was small at first, then broken, then honest. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know. She said she felt ashamed. And I believed her. Not because she was perfect, but because for the first time, she sounded like herself. Not like her family. Just Olivia. We met 2 days later in a park near the river. No big scene. No dramatic music. Just two people sitting on a bench with too much pain between them. She kept her eyes down for a long time before she finally said, "I should have protected you." I looked at her. "You didn't know, but I should have seen it." "Yes," I said quietly. "You should have." That hurt her. I could see it. But truth matters more than comfort sometimes. She nodded slowly and wiped her face. "I loved you," she said. "I know," I replied. "And I still do." I didn't answer right away, because love is not always enough. Love cannot fix disrespect. Love cannot erase humiliation. Love cannot turn a poisoned house into a safe one. Finally, I said, "I loved you too, but love without trust dies in a place like that." She closed her eyes. Then she whispered, "I understand." And maybe that was the closest thing to peace we were going to get. I did not go back to the Carter house. Not ever. I moved out. I rebuilt my life. I found my own place. I focused on work. I slept better. I ate better. I stopped waking up every morning, wondering what new insult would be waiting for me. As for Richard and Melissa, their world did not collapse overnight. Real life is not like the movies. Sometimes the downfall takes time. Investigations take time. Legal things take time. But the public truth spread fast enough. Fast enough for people to talk. Fast enough for relatives to pull away. Fast enough for the family's perfect image to crack in front of everyone who once admired them. And that was enough.